I just picked up all my irrigation stuff from the barge. Water timers. Okay folks, so the video today is going to be about irrigation. And I'm not sure how this is going to go. I'll try and keep on track. I guess to start out, I've just got to explain that I've got a couple little greenhouses back here, and so we're going to extend that. It's going to be 10 feet by 40 feet. And then over there in the corner over there is going to be a 20 foot by 60 foot NRCS tunnel. The problem I was having, I was looking for videos, small farms, market gardens, where, you know, what were they doing for irrigation? And oddly enough, I don't know if I was searching for the wrong things, but I really couldn't find much. And what I was finding was mostly like landscapers were, you know, people who were doing flowers and trees and brushes. And then there was some really detailed information on some of those videos about how to set up, you know, an irrigation system. So I kind of went from those, and but you know, it's kind of hard because it's like, well, is this gonna apply to market gardening? You know, I had this piece of paper that I erased, and so much that it's like kind of tissue paper thin, I don't know. And so I just had a picture of like the bigger garden. This is the smaller, what's going to be the 10 by 40 foot tunnel, and then what's going to be the NRCS tunnel over here. Not quite to scale, but you know, so I could kind of get an idea. And then on the other side of this, I actually just drew out so I could see it, not just in my mind, but on paper, you know, kind of like how the fittings would work, you know, hose, water timer, you know, pressure regulator, you know, and then, you know, the different size of hose, and then what would I have to run each line out through the bed. And so yeah, so that's kind of how I got it in so I could see it. You know, in the videos for the landscapers, they were talking about like the main size tubing was 3/4 inch, and then down to the smaller tubing that went out to different plants and stuff would be like a 1/2 inch tubing. So I kind of went with that, you know. And then the question was, you know, once I've got my 3/4 inch main hose that's right at the head of everything, the lines that run out along the beds in each row, I had the decision to make, you know, do I want to do 1/2 inch hose that has, you know, round hose that has emitters in it, or do I want to use the drip tape that I'm familiar with and that you see most farmers use? And so that was kind of the biggest question that I had. And so as I was looking at that, the smallest in-row spacing that I could get with the tubing was 9 inches. And I could go like, you know, shorter spacing. I could get like an 8-inch spacing, or even smaller, but with like kind of the heavier duty drip tape, I could get a you know, an 8-inch spacing between the drip holes. And so I was kind of like, I don't know what to do. What I was kind of trying to design from is what kind of plants am I going to have out in the NRCS tunnel. And my thinking has been that that's primarily going to be for, you know, my baby green stuff, because I'm having to be planting out in weather, seeding out in weather, harvesting out in weather. And if I can control that, and then plus if I can control pests getting at that stuff where I've had some real problems, then that would just be really great. So that's what I've been planning for my NRCS tunnel. So I'm thinking in terms of my Salanova lettuce transplants. Right now I use a gritter that's 7.5 inches square. So I'm kind of thinking about that kind of spacing, 7.5 inches. And then I would also have like baby greens. And so, you know, would the lines that I have running out there work both for transplanted Salanova lettuce and Jang seeded baby greens? And so, you know, that's where I was thinking about the spacings. I'm usually using 7.5 inches. So now if I go with something here, I want it to be about that spacing, because it's a pretty good spacing for lettuce. And so 9 inches gets a little bit bigger, so maybe I should go with the 8-inch. So then that makes me lean towards the drip tape. Tyler was saying that, maybe the drip tubing is going to have a tendency to kind of want to curl or whatever over, and then you're getting your drip in funny places. I don't know if that's going to would be the case or not, but I'm kind of thinking about that. Also, the drip tape is a lot less expensive than the drip tubing, so I could get more of it. And so if I had to switch things out later on down the years, if it were to wear out, I would have more of it. Yeah, so those were some of the things that I was thinking about. Towards the end of it, I was thinking, maybe I should have gotten the drip tubing, because I think that it can handle more water pressure than what the drip tape is allowed. And so what then I had to do as I was designing the different fittings and stuff is that I would need a pressure regulator that would drop it down to 10 psi for the drip tape, whereas the tubing would have been able to take a higher psi. And so that meant that I had to buy little more expensive, a bunch of these pressure reducers, some 10 psi and a bunch of them 30 psi. And anyway, so I don't know if I made the right decision there, but that's what I ended up doing. And so then as I was designing this thing, I was thinking in terms again of my lettuces. And so I've been in my little greenhouses where I mostly have like either 1 row of cucumbers or like 4 rows of basil. I've been running 4 lines down the bed, the 30-inch bed. And it's been kind of a pain, because then like I'm having to put one of the basil plants out they're going to be out towards the edges of the bed where it kind of dries out in those raised beds. And so then I thought, like, shouldn't I, in my big greenhouse where I have the lettuce, I've got 4 rows of lettuces transplanted, and I could just run, in between 1, 2, 3 lines of irrigation, drip irrigation out there for each of them. And then I thought, well, and that might be sufficient to wet a bunch of, direct seeded, Jang seeded baby greens also. 3 lines, and that might work good in the little greenhouse over here too. I can plant basil, just 3 rows of basil. And since the drip emitters are spaced a little bit closer than what I've got here, in the past I've used 12-inch, and so I'd be going down to 8-inch so I could get all the same amount of plants in. We'll see if that makes them too close or not. So I'm going, okay, that makes sense. And then also something I'm going to need to be thinking about, and I've run into this problem in the little greenhouses, is that when I'm starting, the beginning of the season and trying to germinate direct seeded baby greens, I need to wet more like the surface of the soil. And so drip really doesn't do that very well. So I considered like getting these little sprayers that spray out, some water and kind of wet the whole thing. And I could get some tubing, not drip tape, but some tubing, and put some of those little spray emitters out there periodically so that it evenly wets the surface. And then I was thinking that might even be very critical for later on in the season when I'm starting some more direct seeded greens, when it's warmer and drier and I really need to wet the surface. The one I was looking at in this catalog, there were some that just like kind of shot out a stream of water, whereas these looked like they sent out a spray of water. So I thought that makes sense then, because then I can switch out the center of the 3 lines in a bed and have those little emitters getting everything wet. And then once everything's come up, I can replace that with the drip tubing, so then I have 3 drips running. Okay, I've decided I'm going to run 3 lines per bed. So then how much of each size line do I need? So I looked at the 3/4 inch and how much I needed for the headers, and and for each of the structures, and also that if I considered running that, you know, the 3/4 inch line all the way up to the house. Okay, so this is the drip tape.
Aqua Trax 12/8 inch, 8-inch emitter spacing.
Check. This looks like the 3/4 inch mainline tubing. Product 34500.
Product 34500. Check.
These are the 2 boxes of 1/2 inch tubing. Product number 12500.
12500. Check.
Then I had to, okay, how am I going to actually do, you know, put these fittings together so that I can run the drip and everything else out from on each bed. And I had to decide, so typically when I'm running water to a bed, it's all going to one bed. I don't like turn one line on and then, and that, you know, like in the whole bed, if it's going to get watered, it's going to get watered. If I'm only running that center line of, you know, of spraying to wet the surface, then, you know, I want to be able to turn different lines off. And the problem was that if I don't run everything off of one header line, then I have to run a line to the bed and then have all these extra fittings for that one bed, because now I don't have, you know, I could just choose to turn one valve on to the whole bed, and now I've got various little valves that I'm having to turn on to each drip line, you know, in the bed. And it's just like, but I'm like, it's okay, it's fine, that's what I'm going to do, and if I want to switch it up later on, I can. And so then one thing that Tyler was saying was that I probably should go with a hose threads rather than just everything. You know how drip line, you can push it in and then you screw the little guy down, and then you know, then if you want to take it apart, you can just kind of pull it apart or whatever. But he was saying it would give me more flexibility if I had a hose thread so that I could thread things on. So for the main line, the head line at each in the greenhouse, I would have these T's, and they would have a hose thread on them, and then I would put a hose valve that I can turn on and off for each of the lines going out each of the beds, and then it would go from, and that's all 3/4 inch size stuff. And so then I want my drip stuff to be 1/2 inch, whether that's drip hose or that's drip tape. And then you got your female hose start to the 1/2 inch drip tube. So those are for the tubing where I have my little spray emitters. And then for the tape, that's a different fitting. So for the drip tape, the female hose swivels, and I needed a bunch of those because I've got a lot of drip tape compared to the drip hose. Yeah, so anyway, and then I got a bunch of stakes. They're just these metal stakes that go down and hold the lines in place, whether it's a drip line or tubing. And so then I also needed at the ends to be able to plug those off, and so I got some end caps for those, for the 1/2 inch line. And then 3/4 inch male hose end caps, I just got a couple of those, so I just wanted to be able to end the line at the head with those. And so that was kind of how that was going to work. And then, you know, I would need to go from 3/4 inch. I've got a female hose start that would go to, that I would then put my pressure regulator on, which would reduce the pressure from my water system down to what could be handled by the irrigation. And then that pressure regulator would go into a water timer, which I've never used before, but it would be super nice to have something I can just set to come on in the morning or whatever, turn off. And so then that timer would get tied into, I would use a Y hose splitter so that I had an extra hose, like if I wanted to hand water or something like that. And with my timer, I decided to go with like a 3 a zone timer. It's got 3 hoses that I can put in different zones, because in the big NRCS tunnel, I will probably have a zone in the far back that is growing something like taller that's different than the stuff that's running in like what I'll probably keep as 40-foot beds. And in the other greenhouse, I have 2 beds, and I have a walkway in between, which I've planted in the past. I ended up getting 3 because I'm gonna have 2 running. If I ever had a problem, I'd want to be able to swap one out. So I thought, since I'm getting all these and shipping is so expensive, I just need to get what I need, right? Yeah, and then as far as how I'm gonna run, you know, like I'll probably run the water out to the little greenhouse first, and then I'll run that around, and then I'll tie in the stuff over here at this greenhouse. At the far end, just to kind of keep hoses and stuff out of the way of this kind of center area of the garden. I got a number of 3/4 inch elbows, so those will be going in the main line if I need them, say to go around a sharp corner. And then I got some goof plugs in case I put a hole in one of the tubes and that's not where I want it. I could put some goof plugs in there. And now I'm looking down here at the very bottom, male hose end, a male pipe end, a female hose end. These are all the small components. Doop-de-doo, doop-de-doo, doop-de-doo. Okay, so it looks like they're shipping this female hose swivel separately. I'm not sure how that's going to work. If it's going to come on the barge, I'm going to have to pay another $100. That's weird. The original irrigation I had in the greenhouses here, the little guys, were from a kit. It was called Irrigator or whatever, because I didn't know anything about irrigation, and it really was the best thing for me. I've used it for years, and you know, it's a little bit janky and stuff like that, but because I didn't know what I was doing, getting a kit made a lot more sense. And so what I discovered right off is when I was fiddling around with a 3/4 inch hose for the main header for my irrigation system, was that the hose is just like way stiffer than I've ever worked with. So I'm just like, oh my gosh, I need a heat gun to warm this up to get this going. And so that's when I was like, this is going to take too long. And so I set up the old irrigation, you know, to run three lines, and I put the new drip lines on that, and so that I could plant my basil, which had to go out. And so then I got it on that line. I left enough at the far end so that I could put the new header with the new fittings on the other end and run it from that direction where I want to run it from. And so anyway, so just yesterday, I finally was able to heat up the ends of the 3/4 inch main hose and then like put the fittings together, and it worked fine. It worked pretty good. And so now I kind of got the feel for that. And like I set up like, okay, this is a 30-inch bed, and I had already kind of fiddled around with what the distances between the plants were going to be, and I kind of liked it when I planted the basil with the 3 lines. Okay, so I got one length done, and the long lengths in between are 5 inches, and the little tiny lengths at the end are 2 inches. And I set it up so that, you know, right now I've got end caps on each of these lines, but then I can just switch this right over to this new header system. And so in this end, I'm going to want to hook up some hoses to each bed from the different zones, and then there'll be a hose coming out of here. So we'll see how that goes. It was officially summer yesterday, and today we got our first temperatures above 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's cool. Things are growing. Tyler earlier this week saw the fawns back of the garden, but I haven't seen them. So when I do, I'll get a picture. For now, all I have for you is some flowering kale in the sunlight. See you guys next week.